Thank you. Thank you, Doctor, for being here. In your introductory remarks, with regard, you said the Electoral Commission recommended in January 2014 that in future voters be required to present a proof of identity, as is already the requirement in Northern Ireland. So what is the proof of identity? Is it in the form of a card, or what? Is it something that's issued by the Electoral Commission prior to voting? And what is included? What information is in that identity piece, whatever it is?
Here I would follow Professor Thomas in the memo that he sent you, that the UK Electoral Commission declared in January of this year its desire to include that, but hasn't yet said exactly the form that it should take. And so we don't know yet. That's the simple answer. The slightly more complex answer, and I hope I can help a bit on this, is that we have had a more stringent system operating in Northern Ireland. And in Northern Ireland, you don't require an address, but you do require a photo ID. And if you can't get a document, you can be registered with a special document by the electoral authorities before the election. And this document is something rather more robust than your voter information card, which is just sent out automatically. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the implication for Canada is that if there are people who can't have the photo IDs or documents with addresses on, and if the voter information card is inaccurate in about 8% of cases, there should be a facility to register with a special identification before the election so that you can come in on election day and cast your ballot. In other words, a rather beefed up version of the voter information card that is registered before. And the logic of that would be to especially organize on old people's homes, university campuses, yes, yeah, some Indian areas, that those should be organized so that you wouldn't actually be denying the vote to people who couldn't produce the address IDs.
So I
hope that's a bit helpful.
Yes, a bit. So in Northern Ireland, is the photo ID, what are the accepted forms? Is it some of the driver's license? I don't know if you have health cards over in that country. What are the forms that are acceptable there and which you may be following in the UK?
I did look up the website of the Northern Ireland Electoral Office, and that information is there in detail. Okay. And so if I may refer you to that, if you'd like me to send it to you afterwards, I'm very happy to do so.
If you could send that to the clerk, Doctor, that'd be helpful. Could I have another question, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
In the UK, do you permit robocalling? You familiar with that? Do you have it in your system?
I did come across robocalling only in looking, doing my homework before this meeting. I'm not aware of this. And certainly, if there has been organized calling to mislead voters, that, I think, would constitute a real offence if you're trying to dissuade people from voting. And so the answer is that I'm not aware of it, but if you had it, I'm sure that we'd look askance at it.
So it does not exist in the UK?
I've not come across it,
okay,
although there are telephone banks and stuff, but I've not I've not come across this as being used in elections.
Okay. Well, it's been used here, and it's been proven to be fraudulent by courts. And in this legislation that's before us, the commissioner, the chief electoral commissioner, he does not have the power to compel witnesses. Records are only kept for 1 year, and the records do not include the telephone number of the person called. So I don't see how the commissioner can do his or her job. It almost looks to me like the system's designed so he or she cannot. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's difficult for
I
me
mean,
to
you have looked at the
thoughts
legislation,
from
right?
afar on that. Look, I am slightly disturbed about something that is behind your question. There has been an implication in the debate from the opposition that the government, in making its various proposals, has deliberately wanted to allow certain practices and not allow others. And therefore, the bona fides of all of this are suspect.
Yes.
Now, knowing human beings and politicians, politicians often deserve to be regarded with suspicion. And so it's possible, I mean, people do compete for votes in clean and in dirty ways. I'm not going to accuse anybody of having done that. I do feel that although we must pay regard to human nature, that applies to all sides in politics, it applies to administrators, it applies to everybody. We're all human beings and subject to frailties. I hope that the discussion can look at the realities because that's how you find technical solutions. Because if people are impugning the bona fides of others, then you're never going to come to a common sense, robust answer to questions. And so I would rather not impugn anybody's motives, but to look for effective ways of controlling things that need to be controlled. And I think that what is needed now are lines of communication between officials, between the parties, with each other, to try to resolve the technical questions to everybody's satisfaction.
Okay.
We'll move on to Senator Duschinsky.
Thank you very much.
I think that unless one can have some procedures to let one go further, there'll just be an argument and nobody will convince anybody.
I'm just not finished, so I'll come back in the second round. Thank you, Chair.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Monsieur Duschinsky.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Duschinsky, thank you. Do you have the English interpretation, or do you speak French? Do you hear the English interpretation, Mr. Duschinsky? Do you understand me?
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur.
Vous comprenez. Bon, alors, premièrement...
But you understand what I am saying. First of all, I agree with you when you say that elections are a reoccurring phenomenon. They occur every 3 or 4 years or so. So this is not something that comes upon us at the very last moment. We have to plan for it. And in terms of citizens' participation, you've talked about the possibility of a card, an ID card. But times also change, and we have to adjust to the changing reality. You know, some years ago, if we came to the door of Parliament, the door was open to us and we were welcomed by the person who was there. But today, to access Parliament, you have to identify yourself. You have to produce some form of identification with your address, with a photograph that shows who you are. You almost have to produce your birth certificate. So times have changed. I'd like to hear what you have to say about this. I do know that you touched on it earlier.
I'm not sure that I understand your question. Is the implication of your question that in modern conditions it's reasonable to expect fuller identification of individuals?
Oui, effectivement.
Yes, yes. You know, not very long ago, if you took a plane, you just got on the plane with your suitcase. But today, there are all kinds of checkpoints before you even access the plane. You have to identify yourself. Let me give you an example. Everywhere you go now, you have to identify yourself. For what the causes are, well, we could discuss that at length. But when you come to the House of Parliament here, you have to identify yourself. Those who go to work within Parliament have an ID, and those who are elected to Parliament have to also, in a sense, identify themselves. Self-identification everywhere you go is part of the way we live today. I just want to hear your comments. Isn't it time to modernize the way we do things?
There is a fairly basic dilemma here. In countries where they have a national identity card, then electoral administration becomes easier. I mean, in Denmark, for example, you have to register your address with the local police within a month of moving. And so there is a tradition of greater registration with the authorities by individuals. In countries like the United Kingdom, for example, we have traditionally regarded compulsory individual identity cards as restrictive of freedom, of being something that occurs in a police state and rather than a free state. So there has been a resistance to the introduction of a national identity card. Certainly, the Conservative Party in opposition resisted the proposal by Labour that an identity card should be introduced in Britain on freedom, individual freedom grounds. Now, those grounds undoubtedly make elections more difficult. And the question which then arises is, should the demands of an election card for everyone be a backdoor route towards an individual identity card for all purposes? And I think that is an important underlying question. In Britain, we haven't resolved that because there is the issue of principle about individual freedom. But if we have the view that we don't have a national identity card, then the electoral authorities have a much harder job to do. And I'm afraid that is just an underlying reality.
Un dernier commentaire.
Just a last comment, Mr. Chair. You know, in Canada, to benefit from government services, people for some years now have to have a social insurance card with a social insurance number on it. It doesn't restrict your freedom, but it allows you to benefit from some social benefits, if you like, that are offered by the government in terms of restricting liberty or freedom. We could have that discussion, but I am not convinced. But I thank you, sir, for your answers.